Good morning, everybody. I'm really excited to be here. I'm a huge Pendo fan for a good reason, and I'm going to share some stories with you today, and hopefully they'll inspire you to go back and maybe leverage some of the stuff we are doing with Pendo. But I think I was already introduced. I'm a senior UX designer at Marketo. I'm also the lead UX researcher at Marketo, and I'm also leading up all the Pendo-related activities and various initiatives around it for the past year or so. So lots going on, but I wanted to start out by mentioning that I tweaked my topic a little bit. I got really inspired yesterday by some of the sessions and some of the discussions I had with some of you, and especially Wade's keynote in the morning. So I made my discussion a little bit more UX-centric, and so I had to work overnight to kind of fine-tune my talking points a little bit. So when we talk about user experience design, or product design, or product strategy, at the core, the fundamentals are the same, the desires are the same. We all want to build the most amazing experiences, the most amazing products for our customers, for our users. That does not change, right? We all want to have the maximum adoption rates and the best retention rates. That does not change. We would all love to have an NPS of like plus 100, right, if possible. It's just that in our respective roles, the journey to build these experiences is different. That lens is different. So as a product person, typically, you would focus on the what needs to be built. You would worry about things like, is it useful for the user? The usefulness. Hopefully, you are worrying about the usefulness, right? As a UX person, you worry about the how. How is the user going to use this tool or this product at all? You get into those nitty-gritty, those granular details about the interaction details of the user interface. So a UX person is going to worry about things like the delight and the usability. So if you just imagine, if you had an awesome combination of usefulness, usability, and delight, you are already on your way to creating amazing experiences, right? Now, Wade had mentioned in his keynote, he talked a lot about discovery. I don't know if you recall that, but discovery being a huge component of your product design and strategy process. I couldn't agree more. So what I'm going to do is, the first few minutes, I'm going to share with you the UX research thinking and related processes that we are following at Marketo, and how we are using those to sort of guide our design direction. And I'm going to then share some examples of how we are using data to inform design and inform our research direction. So these are going to be very contextual to Marketo, and some of you are Marketo customers and users here, so I think you will maybe, hopefully, enjoy what we are trying to do with this data to improve your experience. So again, contextual to Marketo. Hopefully they'll inspire you as well to do something similar with your processes and projects. All right. Insights. To me, customer insights or user insights are at the core of all user experience design, right? Whether you are designing a brand new product or a brand new feature from scratch that does not exist in the system today, or whether you are embarking on making continuous iterative improvements to your system, regardless, you need insights to continuously inform you and guide you in your decision making, right? So what becomes important then is that you come up with a methodology, a system, to quantify your user experience in your product. So when we talk about quantifying UX, somebody would say, well, let's start just using some UX metrics like number of page views or clicks on tasks and so on. They're good insights, but they're not always relevant for every product all the time. So a metric, a UX metric that is meaningful to me might not be meaningful to somebody else for their product. So one has to understand that context. But the most important part is that you do come up with a way to quantify that UX. You want to prove going forward that you moved the UX needle with the new experience. And hopefully, you moved it in the right direction. Right? And if you didn't, that's okay. You're still allowed to be bummed for a couple of days maybe, but then go back, do it again, go back to the drawing board, try again. But as long as you are continuing to gather insights, okay, don't forget that part. You have to continue gathering those insights. You will be moving in the right direction. I firmly believe in that. All right, so where does one get these insights from? Before we dive into that, I wanted to share a system that I have come up with for myself. It is not prescriptive by any means, but it helps me sort of group the insights that I like to derive when I'm trying to solve a problem. So the who, obviously, is who's using the product. I would like to know that. That's the segmentation or the demographics we are talking about. The why is, obviously, why is somebody motivated to use my product at all? What drives them to even use this feature? I would want to know that. When? When could be about when do they use my product? What time of the day, what time of the week, maybe how many times they're using it during the day and so on, the frequency. Where do they access my product from? Is it on the mobile device or a desktop, a tablet, or where could also allude to maybe where are they located? So it could be localization or internationalization. What? What is about, what are they doing in the system? What are they clicking on? What are the pain points? What is actually working today? What are the gaps in the functionality? All of those insights fall into that bucket. So again, I try to bucket my insights into these areas. It works for me. What becomes important then is where do these insights come from? So the first place where you could maybe start gathering these insights is usability data. And these are obviously quantifiable numbers. It's, in my experience, at least, product people tend to be hesitant, almost scared sometimes, to look at data because it reveals something that is not very pleasant. As unpretty as this data might look like, it is still your friend. It is still your true friend. The true friend we all have in our lives that, there's always tells you the truth, the honest truth. The data is that friend for you if you're a product person. Data will always constantly remind you about what is going on in the system. It's not going to lie to you. Okay, so don't forget that if you are continuing to use data in your day-to-day design practice, it will continue to drive you in the right direction. So I firmly believe in that. Now, another thing to remember is that design is just never done. You have to continuously iterate upon it. Good design evolves over time. And the way you do it is by looking at data continuously. So remember that part. So usability data is telling you what is going on in the system. You still need to understand the why. the motivations. And for that, you conduct user research, right? So I'm going to give you an example, and this is not related to Marketo, but in my previous job, I was working as a lead UX architect at Effective, which is a UX agency in Denver. And FedEx was a client of ours. And this is a fascinating research study that I did for them. They wanted to modernize their customs clearance application. And to give you some context, FedEx has these international hubs in Memphis and Indianapolis and Ottawa and Oakland and so on. And each hub can receive up to like 2 to 4 million packages every night. And they have about 300 planes that bring all these packages in, and they have to quickly process all these packages, before the plane even arrives. So there's massive amounts of activity that happens between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. every night. And they use this application to track about 200 data points per package. It's this massive effort that happens. It's absolutely fascinating. So they hired us to conduct a usability study on this app. And they wanted then to modernize it. So I conducted about 31 interviews, one-on-one, 1 hour each, between those hours, in the winter months while it was snowing outside, standing at the tarmac. And it's the most amazing user research I've ever done in my whole life. And I'm going to share one example where I was sitting down with this user, and in his little cube, it was an open cube, planes are still standing there, and he had 2 monitors. And he started showing me how he was using the app. And I noticed he had all these, like a bazillion stickies around the monitors. And I was fascinated, I was intrigued, I was kind of amused, but I'm like, maybe it's some private information, I just ignored it. But then I noticed he was glancing towards those stickies as he was working his way through the application. So I could not stop myself any further. I said, what are you doing? What are these stickies about? And he's like, oh, no, just ignore it. It's something, I don't remember all the details that I need to fill in when I'm working on this app, so, I have these notes for myself. That was gold. That was gold to me. If I were on the phone talking to this person, I would have never, ever gotten that insight, ever. So I wanted to share this example to tell you, to inform you, to educate some of you here as to what is user research. It's not as simple as just, hey, Mr. User, how's it going? Do you love my product? How do you feel? No, it's so much more than that. You have to build empathy with the users. Each one of us is a user of a different system every single day, right? So we respond differently to the question of what do you like or dislike in the system. You want to build that empathy, and it takes some time. It takes passion. It takes a genuine approach to wanting to get to know the user. So I'm very passionate about this. I love doing this, and it really helps me in my design practice as well. So hopefully this was useful for you. So we have user research that is giving you qualitative insights. Lastly, I wanted to define what UX research means to me. So again, not a prescriptive definition, but many times people ask me, isn't UX research the same as user research? Like, what's the difference? So maybe it's a little academic, but this definition works for me, that UX research is the combination of the quant and the qual, right? You're getting the qual from the user research and the quant from usability data. And if you combine the what and the how and the why, you have a full bucket of insights to inform you. So that is UX research from my perspective. All right, so that academic lesson is over. Let's move on to Marketo. What are we doing with data at Marketo? I joined the UX team at Marketo 2 years ago now. And I was tasked with establishing a research-focused design practice that never existed before. And the first thing I asked the team was, where's the data? I need the data. And they looked at me like weirded out, like as if I was talking about some alien language or something. Like, what do you mean data? We don't, our customers love us. You know, we go to Marketo Nation every year and we have thousands of customers. And, you know, it's like they're in raptures about Marketo, and we already know the product and we don't need data. You know, I don't know if any of you can identify with that, with your own products, but that's what I inherited 2 years ago. There was no data. There was no culture around discovery, you know. Any research that was going on was completely ad hoc. Once in a while, somebody would run a Splunk report, but that too was more about gathering maybe performance data, but not usability. Big difference. So I quickly realized that we at least needed a tool in place as soon as possible that could be leveraged by the UX people, by the product people, that would be easily accessible, easily implementable, where we could get these insights very fast, you know, and we could do the slicing and dicing and so on. And but that, at least I didn't know what that platform or that solution was going to be, but I realized we needed it. Well, fast forward 15 months. In July of last year, we finally signed up with Pendo. So it took 15 months after I joined to finally get this in-house. And I'll spare you the details, but we went through a very, very thorough vetting process, and there was a lot of resistance. A lot of the product people asked me, well, why don't we just use Google Analytics? You know, it's free. You know, and I'm like, well, nothing is truly free, you know. Nothing is ever truly free. But it was still a legitimate question, and I'm not going to pitch Pendo versus Google Analytics here. I'm not trying to sell it, but it was still a valid question. And what became quite apparent to us was that Pendo is definitely designed for the enterprise B2B platforms, you know. The ease of use, the easy way of being able to send metadata about your account objects or user objects, it's so easy. You can just tweak your snippet, and there you go. You have retroactive data, like we at Marketo have retroactive data from 2 years ago. We can easily segment. We can do SFDC integrations. We have actionable insights. We can do NPS and surveys and guides based on this data. So it became a no-brainer that we needed a solution like Pendo, and then obviously after this vetting process, we chose to go with Pendo. So very excited. We have done a lot of work. What I wanted to share with you next is how is Pendo data helping us in our design process. So August 1st, first day after we have Pendo in-house, and I'm thinking, what do we do with this, right? And well, I didn't start thinking on that day, but I had been thinking about it for a while. So those of you, I know there are some Marketo users here. The application is 12 years old. It is archaic. And I apologize for the horrible UX and UI. It has never, ever been overhauled. We are working on it. So 3 years ago, the then UX team, they started on this project, this massive project, to completely overhaul this experience. So again, when I joined 2 years ago, they were already a year into it. And I asked the team, have you done an audit? If you are going to redesign an enterprise platform from scratch, have you at least done an audit? Do you know how many pages we are talking about, the number of page types, the number of UI elements that have to be redesigned? If you want to come up with a design system, because that was the goal, what does that even mean, right? You have to have an audit. Nothing was done, which was really shocking. So please, if you ever embark on a journey like that with your product, please at least do an audit. So I thought, August 1st, maybe we can start using Pendo to baseline the current experience, so that going forward, we can make sure that we move the UX needle with the new experience, right? So I talked about this earlier, coming up with a methodology, a system to measure, to quantify the user experience. Well, Pendo became the tool for us. So in order to help us get to that place, what I did in the next several months, single-handedly, I tagged 250 plus unique pages in the application, over 700 features, and it's been this Herculean task. It's been an amazing journey. It's been a lot of hard work, and the code is a decade old. So our HTML is really, really archaic, like badly constructed. Don't even get me started. But thanks to Pendo's tools, they helped me tag these pages and features relatively easily. I also do front-end development, so it was easy for me to go into the code and create some of these rules. But again, it is a powerful tool, and it helped me get my job done. All the work has paid off tremendously. And next, I'm going to show you the data that I'm deriving from this tagged information, and I'm going to show 4 or 5 examples. So hopefully you learned something from it. Understanding core journeys in the current system. So Marketo users here, you can relate to it. There are no wizards in the application. So there's no step 1, 2, 3 kind of an approach. It's a very open, very, very flexible system. Even if you have to complete 5 tasks to create a program or a campaign, you can do that in any order, right? So it's a very flexible system, but then it becomes really important to understand how users are going through that journey, right? What is that optimal journey that users are taking to, let's say, create a campaign or a program? And with no data existing to date, we had no idea what they were doing. So we wanted to understand the core journeys that people were taking. If there were multiple ways of doing things, what were the favorite paths that people were taking? What were the redundancies that we could maybe potentially eliminate, and so on. So once you have tagged information in Pendo, this is a screenshot I've taken. This is a quick example of, I could easily see, I could set my start point. So from the home page, I could see the journey as to where are people moving towards, right? Pendo allows you, I think the default is 10 levels deep, but you can go up to, I think you can configure it the way you want. You can also do it by endpoint. So here I'm saying, how did somebody get to notifications, right? Now, so that's at the face value. I can see, okay, this is the most, I would say, popular journey. But I also know that there are only 2 ways of getting to notifications, right? So the other insights I can gather here are what might be the motivators. Like, what is the mental model? What is somebody doing when they feel like they need to access notifications? So this data is, again, it's not telling me everything, but it is telling me enough to then do further research with users, right? Another area is understanding in-page navigation. This is absolute madness in our app. We have tabs on the top. We have menus and tabs underneath. We have multiple levels of tabs. Those blue boxes are also sort of tabs, going back to some of those other places. We have links that navigate to some of these other tabs. It's a mess. And I'm sorry. But we wanted to at least understand if anybody's actually navigating this way, right? Pendo to the rescue. We have, at a single click of a button, I have heat maps. I don't have to explain the heat map to you. It's pretty self-evident. But imagine this. I have tagged 250 pages. I've been able to give heat maps for 250 pages to the design team. So they are optimizing the flows based on this information today. It's awesome. Unused tools. This is a prime example I wanted to show you. The tree on the left is where most marketers spend all of their time in. This is where you create all your campaigns, your programs, your marketing assets. I have seen examples. I was sitting down with the user at Hitachi. In one workspace, they had about 10,000 nodes and about 7 levels deep of foldering. So they can search. There's something called marketing activities at the top, and you can search by typing in. But we also have filtering built in, right, to quickly hone into the assets you want to look at. And when I looked at the data, it revealed to me that almost very few people were using filtering. And it was shocking to me that such an important feature available to them to quickly hone into their assets was not being used. Right? So data did inform me that it was not being used, but then we did further discovery, and it turns out that most people thought it was just some icon sitting there. And it was weird. So there was a UX failure there. There was also, I would say, a failure on the part of the product team in general to not even measure adoption of certain tools that we deemed were important, but they were never used. So we are discovering a lot of these unused tools, and we are trying to make it better. For those of you, again, who use Marketo, the new experience that is going to be rolled out in a few months, we are completely redoing filtering, and it's going to be a lot better. Redundant tools. A lot of users, they spend a lot of time creating new assets in the trees, like a new email, a new landing page, a new webinar. And they can do it by doing a right click in the tree on the left, or they can access a menu at the top. We discovered through data that predominantly users like to do the double click or the right click in the tree, and they never navigate to the top, right? So we knew the what was going on. We didn't know the why. So upon doing discovery and research, it became quite evident that in order to create an asset, you have to first select the parent in the tree anyway. So once you're in the tree, you're already there, so you will just do a right click and create the asset right there contextually. Right? Makes logical sense, but it didn't 10 years ago. So we are eliminating, I believe we are eliminating that menu from the top. So reduce cognitive, I would say, overload by simplifying the UI, right? It's just one example of how you can do it. Low adoption. We feel that these two functionalities, the setup and my tokens for a program, they are really, really fundamental for a marketer. So when we onboard them initially, we talk about these features, but they're really more advanced level features. So 6 months down the road, you have been using Marketo, you forget about these. We thought that these were so vital for their day-to-day, but the adoption on these through data that we were able to reveal was that there was very low adoption, right? So again, upon further research, we discovered that people are intimidated by using this functionality. It's too hard to use. So again, data is constantly informing us, and we are then doing further research to validate what we are finding, and then we are fine-tuning the designs as we go. So there are a couple of learnings here as well, that it is important that you interpret the data correctly, and I'll show you a quick example after this. And data on its own likely won't tell you the whole story, right? So again, when you land on a page, a program default page in Marketo, there are 5 tabs at the top, but the default page gets the most views. Each tab has its own URL, but the only way you can navigate to, let's say, members is through the default tab, right? So the motivation might be that I really want to get to members, but the only way I can do it is through the default page, right? So just because the default page has the most views doesn't mean it's the most useful, right? That was not the intention to go there. The intention was something else. So look at data. Don't look at it at face value. Look at the context as to what the user might be wanting to do. Okay, that's important. All right. So hopefully these examples were a little useful to see what we are doing with data. Going forward, we want to release the new product by the end of the year or so. We are still working on it, but we want it to be Pendo ready on day 1, and I'll tell you what that means. This is an example of the code from the current system, and I know you cannot read it, but I've highlighted in yellow some of the IDs we are using on our UI elements. So when Pendo tags your features, it goes through the code and it looks like these unique identifiers, like IDs, and if it finds a unique ID, it'll tag it. So the good news was that, we have IDs built on our divs in our HTML code. The problem is these are dynamic. So an ID that is XYZ-1 might be XYZ-2 in a different session for another user. And I cannot wildcard these rules, feature rules, in Pendo. So there was no way for me to uniquely identify these features using IDs. So I had to come up with insane rules like this. This took me almost 2 hours to figure out. Now, so don't feel threatened by this tool, but this was not all over the place. This was in a few instances I had to go this route. It's amazing that I was able to even tag these features, but I was still able to. That's the good news. But how about if you could substitute all of that with just that? This is the power of Pendo. It allows you to create custom HTML attributes in your code that Pendo can then easily tag and read, but it has to be done proactively, right? So if you don't build these types of IDs, your custom attributes early on, you won't get the retroactive data going forward. So what I'm doing, I'm working with the engineering teams, and I'm giving them guidance on how to build these data IDs into the code now. So page after page after page, I'm giving them this type of guidance. Build these IDs on these UI elements. Not only that, I'm also giving them guidance on how to name them. So when I look at this data ID, I should be able to quickly see, at least get to the ballpark of what this feature is about and where it might be living on the user interface. So there's a lot of work going on with making the new experience, the new application, Pendo ready on day 1. Very excited about it, and it's going to really help us quantify that UX. We want to make sure that we are moving the UX needle, and we'll be able to really easily tag everything on day 1. So that's the plan. Lastly, challenges. There are always challenges. A year ago, there was no Pendo. There was no data-informed or data-driven design practice. We had no in-app messaging capabilities, and I was working really hard to evangelize this practice. All of a sudden, about 3 months ago, customer marketing, product marketing, support, documentation, education, obviously product, user experience, everybody wants to start using Pendo like yesterday, right? We have the core Marketo product, but then we have all these modules that we sell. They exist as separate products. So the tagging I've done so far is just the core application. But each product owner wants their products to be tagged as well, right? So it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. It's not a one-person job. So scalability is an issue, but it's a good problem to have, right? Coming from a place of no data to a place where everybody wants it, it's a good thing. So thank you, Pendo, to enable us to do this and to actually create better experiences for our users. Very thrilled. And I will close with that. I hope this was useful. Again, very contextual to Marketo's journey and what we are doing with data. And hopefully you will be inspired by some of this. Thank you. And one thing in closing, I am a big Pendo believer. I love it. I love the people. So thanks for all the great work you are doing. So keep it up. Thank you.